Our first question comes from Bailey, who has a question about economic growth in rural areas. She's from San Juan County. Bailey, you're on the line with Senator Lee.
Hello, Bailey.
Hi. I'm with the San Juan County Chamber of Commerce, and my question is, in urban areas, markets work efficiently. Let me start again. In urban areas, markets work efficiently because businesses are able to find all the things they need, from a workforce to supplies. But in rural areas, simple things like finding a qualified workforce, necessary supplies, to funding are large hurdles. How can we find ways to overcome such obstacles in rural Utah and better promote economic development and sustainability?
Okay, Bailey, thanks for that question. You ask a very insightful question. You raise a very good point, which is that people, what they really need more than anything is access to markets. When people have access to markets, they tend to prosper, and they tend to be able to get good jobs. When they don't have access to markets, to whatever degree they lack access to markets, they tend to suffer. There are some things that make it more difficult to access a free market when you live in an outlying rural area. Fortunately, there are other forces that are counteracting those today. Our transportation networks are improving. The fact that we've got internet connectivity to nearly every corner of the state allows almost anyone to operate a business from almost anywhere they want. There are, however, some obstacles that government itself is imposing on people throughout our state in a way that disproportionately affects people in rural communities, including people in Carbon, Emery, Garfield, Grand, Kane, and San Juan counties. For example, the fact that the federal government occupies as much of our land as it does in our state, in particular in these 6 counties, is a problem. The fact that the federal government owns 30% of the land mass in the United States is itself troubling enough. The fact that it owns 2/3 of the land in our state is even more troubling. And the fact that in some of these counties, where you're calling in from this evening, the federal government owns, in many cases, more than 90% of the land, creates some special problems, including the fact that although your county government is responsible for providing search and rescue services, police, security services, providing educational opportunities for your residents, it can't tax most of the land. It can't collect property tax on most of the land because most of it is owned by the federal government. And if this land were owned by basically anyone else, first of all, no one else would be able to own that much land in any one part of our state or in any one part of the country. If they did, it would be troubling. But it's even more troubling when it's the government, and then the government declares itself beyond the authority of the county to collect taxes. So as a result of this, Congress has come up with a program called PILT, which stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes. The idea is that Congress is trying to offset in some way the lack of revenue that you have locally as a result of the fact that so much of your land is owned by the federal government. The problem with this is that throughout most of Utah, PILT covers only a few cents on the dollar compared to what you would get elsewhere, compared to what the county would be able to collect if the county could actually tax that land. I'm trying to change that, and I've got legislation that would give the counties the right to collect the property tax equivalent of that land. And that would help your county develop more of its infrastructure, develop more of what it needs to do in order to serve people well, in order to deliver access to markets. That needs to change. We also need to pass the Public Lands Initiative, the PLI program that Rob Bishop has spearheaded and that I'm sponsoring in the Senate, which would open up our land so that we can actually use it, so that we can actually realize the dream of multiple use, so that we can use appropriate lands for energy exploration and development, for recreational purposes in other cases, and that we'll have expeditious handling of applications for drilling permits. We'll be able to use our land for what we need. These are some of the real market advantages that many of these 6 counties have, is that you've got access to some of the most beautiful territory in the entire world. People want to come there and visit, but we need to be able to use the land for its intended purpose. The Public Lands Initiative legislation would help us to do that. In order to achieve that, we also need a a broader regulatory reform, which we'll be discussing more later during this teletown hall. But needless to say, our federal regulations are proving to be especially burdensome, not just for the American people generally, but especially for Utahns, and particularly Utahns living in rural communities.